Question 1. Comparative studies suggest that in the implementation of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8, one for patch management, organizations often face challenges in balancing rapid vulnerability remediation with operational stability. Considering the need for robust security and compliance, which of the following approaches best addresses this implementation challenge? Option A. Patching only those endpoints that have actively reported a specific vulnerability, without a broader proactive patching schedule. Option B. A phased deployment strategy that includes pilot testing on non-critical endpoints, followed by a staged rollout with continuous monitoring and established rollback procedures. Option C. Prioritizing patch deployment based solely on the number of endpoints affected by a vulnerability, regardless of the severity of the vulnerability itself. Option D. Immediate deployment of all critical patches to all endpoints simultaneously to ensure the fastest possible remediation of known vulnerabilities. The correct answer is B. A phased deployment strategy that includes pilot testing on non-critical endpoints, followed by a staged rollout with continuous monitoring and established rollback procedures. Explanation: scenario analysis. Implementing IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager (TEM) V8. 1. Particularly for patch management and vulnerability remediation, presents a significant challenge due to the dynamic nature of IT environments and the critical need for continuous security posture maintenance. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of patching known vulnerabilities with the potential for disruption to business operations caused by untested or incompatible updates. Organizations must navigate this by establishing robust processes that ensure compliance with security policies and regulatory requirements without hindering productivity. The complexity is amplified by the need to accurately identify, prioritize, and deploy patches across a diverse endpoint landscape, all while maintaining audit trails for compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased deployment strategy for patch management, beginning with a pilot group of non-critical endpoints to test patch compatibility and efficacy. This is followed by a staged rollout to broader segments of the infrastructure, with continuous monitoring for any adverse effects. This methodology aligns with best practices for risk mitigation and operational stability. From a regulatory perspective, this approach supports compliance with frameworks like those mandated by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) for publicly traded companies, which require reasonable measures to protect sensitive data and systems from cyber threats. By systematically testing and monitoring, an organization can demonstrate due diligence in its security operations, providing auditable evidence of a controlled and effective patch management process. This minimizes the risk of introducing new vulnerabilities or operational disruptions, thereby safeguarding business continuity and data integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying patches directly to all endpoints simultaneously without prior testing is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the potential for patch conflicts or system instability, which could lead to widespread operational disruption and data loss. Such an outcome would likely violate data protection regulations, e.g., HIPAA if healthcare data is involved, or PCI DSS for payment card data. By failing to maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of sensitive information. It also demonstrates a lack of due diligence in risk management, which is a core expectation under various cybersecurity frameworks and legal obligations. Implementing patches only for endpoints that have reported a specific vulnerability without a broader proactive patching strategy is also professionally unacceptable. This reactive approach leaves other endpoints vulnerable to zero-day exploits or previously unknown threats that may not yet be widely reported. It fails to meet the proactive security requirements often stipulated by regulatory bodies and industry standards, which emphasize a defense-in-depth strategy. This can result in non-compliance with security mandates that require a comprehensive and continuous vulnerability management program. Ignoring the need for rollback plans and contingency measures during patch deployment is another critical failure. If a patch causes unforeseen issues, the inability to quickly revert to a stable state can lead to prolonged downtime and data corruption. This directly contravenes the principles of business continuity and disaster recovery, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by regulations to ensure resilience against disruptive events. The lack of preparedness demonstrates a failure to adequately assess and mitigate risks associated with system changes. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, phased approach to patch management. This involves understanding the threat landscape, assessing the criticality of endpoints and the potential impact of vulnerabilities, and prioritizing patches accordingly. A robust change management process, including thorough testing in a controlled environment, pilot deployments, and staged rollouts, is essential. Continuous monitoring and the establishment of clear rollback procedures are paramount to ensuring operational stability and minimizing business disruption. This systematic and controlled methodology not only enhances security, but also provides the necessary evidence of compliance and due diligence required by regulatory bodies and stakeholders. Question 2. Compliance review shows that critical security patch, identified as essential for meeting data protection mandates, has been successfully deployed to 95% of managed endpoints via IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1. However, the remaining 5% have not received the patch. What is the most appropriate immediate next step for the implementation team to ensure full compliance and system security? Option A. Immediately redeploy the patch to all endpoints, regardless of whether they initially received it, to ensure complete coverage and address the compliance gap. Option B. Document the current state of patching, acknowledging the 5% gap, and prioritize addressing it in the next scheduled maintenance window to minimize operational disruption. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive investigation into the specific endpoints that did not receive the patch, analyzing TEM logs, agent status, and network connectivity to determine the root cause of the failure, and then develop a targeted remediation plan. Option D. Manually apply the patch to the identified endpoints that did not receive it, bypassing the TEM deployment mechanism to expedite the process. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive investigation into the specific endpoints that did not receive the patch, analyzing TEM logs, agent status, and network connectivity to determine the root cause of the failure, and then develop a targeted remediation plan. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a critical security patch, essential for maintaining compliance with data protection regulations, such as those implied by the C2090-560 exam's focus on enterprise endpoint management, has been deployed to a subset of endpoints, but not all. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the incomplete deployment and rectifying it efficiently without compromising ongoing operations or introducing new vulnerabilities. The pressure to achieve full compliance quickly, coupled with the potential for significant business impact if systems remain vulnerable, demands a systematic and well-reasoned approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a methodical investigation to identify the specific endpoints that did not receive the patch and the reasons for their failure. This includes analyzing TEM Tivoli Endpoint Manager, logs, network connectivity, endpoint agent status, and any relevant error messages. Once the root cause is identified, e.g., network issues, agent malfunction, policy conflicts, a targeted remediation plan can be executed. This approach is best professional practice because it directly addresses the compliance gap by ensuring all endpoints are secured, thereby upholding the organization's commitment to data protection and regulatory adherence. It minimizes disruption by focusing efforts on the actual problem areas and prevents the recurrence of such issues through root cause analysis. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to investigate the root cause and instead attempting a broad, unverified redeployment of the patch across all endpoints is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks overwhelming the TEM infrastructure, potentially causing further deployment failures or system instability. It also fails to address the underlying issues, meaning the problem could recur. From a regulatory standpoint, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in ensuring compliance, as the effectiveness of the remediation is not verified. Ignoring the incomplete deployment and assuming the majority of endpoints are patched is a severe ethical and regulatory lapse. This creates a false sense of security and leaves a portion of the organization's infrastructure vulnerable to known exploits. This directly contravenes the principles of risk management and due diligence required by most data protection frameworks. It also fails to uphold the professional responsibility to ensure the integrity and security of managed endpoints. Attempting to manually patch the affected endpoints without understanding the scale of the problem or the underlying reasons for the TEM deployment failure, is inefficient and prone to error. This approach bypasses the automated capabilities of TEM, which is designed for scalable and consistent management. It also fails to leverage the diagnostic tools available within TEM to identify and resolve systemic issues, leading to a reactive rather than proactive security posture and potentially missing critical compliance requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first prioritizing the identification of the scope and cause of the noncompliance. This involves leveraging the diagnostic and reporting capabilities of the management system, TEM in this case. A structured troubleshooting process, starting with log analysis and moving to targeted investigations, is crucial. Once the root cause is understood, a remediation plan should be developed that is both effective and minimally disruptive. This plan should include verification steps to confirm successful remediation and measures to prevent future occurrences. This systematic approach ensures accountability, adherence to regulatory requirements, and the maintenance of a secure and compliant environment. Question 3. To address the challenge of deploying a critical security patch to a large, diverse endpoint environment using IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1. Which of the following approaches best balances rapid remediation with system stability and compliance? Option A. Conduct a pilot deployment of the patch to a small, representative group of endpoints, monitor for issues, and then proceed with a phased rollout to the remaining endpoints based on pilot success. Option B. Delay the deployment of the patch indefinitely until a perfect, risk-free deployment method can be guaranteed. Option C. Deploy the patch immediately to all endpoints without prior testing to ensure the fastest possible remediation of the security vulnerability. Option D. Manually apply the patch to individual endpoints only after receiving explicit, written confirmation from each endpoint user that they accept any potential risks. Correct answer is C. Deploy the patch immediately to all endpoints without prior testing to ensure the fastest possible remediation of the security vulnerability. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to maintain system integrity and compliance with IBM's Tivoli Endpoint Manager, TEM, V8. 1. Implementation guidelines, which implicitly govern best practices for endpoint management and security. Core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate need for rapid deployment of critical security patches with the potential for unforeseen conflicts or performance degradation introduced by new software. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the deployment process does not inadvertently create new vulnerabilities or disrupt essential business operations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, controlled rollout. This methodology aligns with established IT governance principles and the implicit requirements of a robust TEM V8. 1. Implementation. By testing the patch on a representative subset of endpoints before a full deployment, administrators can identify and mitigate any compatibility issues, performance impacts, or unexpected behaviors in a contained environment. This proactive risk management minimizes the potential for widespread disruption and ensures that the deployed patch is effective and stable. This approach is ethically sound as it demonstrates due diligence in protecting the client's IT infrastructure and adhering to the implied standards of care in system administration. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, unvalidated deployment of the patch to all endpoints is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses essential testing phases, directly violating the principle of controlled change management inherent in TEM V8. 1. Implementations. Such an action could lead to significant operational downtime, data loss, or security breaches if the patch proves incompatible or introduces new vulnerabilities. This failure to exercise due diligence constitutes a breach of professional responsibility and could have severe financial and reputational consequences for the administrator and the organization. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay the deployment indefinitely due to fear of potential issues, is also professionally unsound. While caution is warranted, an indefinite delay in deploying critical security patches leaves the endpoints exposed to known threats, creating a significant security risk. This inaction directly contradicts the primary purpose of endpoint management solutions like TEM, which is to maintain a secure and up-to-date environment. This failure to act in a timely manner, despite the availability of a solution, is a dereliction of duty and exposes the organization to unacceptable risks. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This includes understanding the criticality of the patch, the potential impact of its failure, and the resources available for testing and rollback. A phased deployment strategy, starting with a pilot group and progressively expanding, is generally the most prudent course of action. This allows for continuous monitoring and validation, ensuring that the implementation proceeds smoothly and effectively, while adhering to the implicit best practices of TEM V8. 1. Question 4. Process analysis reveals that during the implementation of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8, 1. A significant number of endpoint inventory discrepancies were identified. These discrepancies include incorrect operating system versions, missing software installations, and inaccurate hardware configurations. The project manager is pushing for immediate deployment to meet a critical business deadline, suggesting that these data issues can be addressed and corrected after the system is live. What is the most ethically and professionally sound course of action? Option A. Proceed with the full deployment as scheduled, documenting the discrepancies for post-implementation remediation, assuming the TEM V8. One system can adapt. Option B. Deploy TEM V8, 1 to a limited set of endpoints with accurate data, and postpone the broader deployment until the data quality issues are resolved across the entire environment. Option C. Halt the full deployment until all identified endpoint inventory discrepancies are thoroughly investigated, validated, and reconciled to ensure data accuracy. Option D. Ignore the identified discrepancies and proceed with the full deployment, assuming they are minor and will not significantly impact the TEM V8, one system's functionality or security. The correct answer is C. Halt the full deployment until all identified endpoint inventory discrepancies are thoroughly investigated, validated, and reconciled to ensure data accuracy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and client confidentiality, particularly when implementing a system like IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager, TEM V8. 1. The core dilemma lies in balancing the immediate need for system functionality and deployment speed with the long-term implications of potentially inaccurate or incomplete data. The pressure to deliver a project on time can create a temptation to overlook or downplay data discrepancies, which can have significant consequences for security, compliance, and operational efficiency. Careful judgment is required to prioritize accuracy and adherence to establish data governance principles over expediency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the validation and reconciliation of endpoint data before proceeding with full deployment. This aligns with best professional practices for system implementation and data management. In the context of IBM TEM V8, 1. Accurate inventory data is fundamental for effective patch management, security policy enforcement, and software license compliance. By ensuring data accuracy, the implementation team upholds the principle of garbage in, garbage out, preventing the system from operating on flawed information. This approach also implicitly adheres to principles of due diligence and responsible system deployment, minimizing the risk of future security vulnerabilities or compliance issues stemming from misidentified or misconfigured endpoints. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the deployment while acknowledging the data discrepancies, but assuming they will be resolved post-implementation. This is professionally unacceptable because it introduces known risks into the production environment. TEM V8. One system might misapply patches, enforce incorrect security policies, or generate inaccurate reports based on the flawed data, leading to potential security breaches or compliance violations. This approach disregards the foundational importance of accurate data for the system's intended functions. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the data discrepancies entirely and proceed with deployment, assuming the TEM V8. One system will automatically correct them, or that they are minor enough not to impact operations. This is a severe ethical and professional failure. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the integrity of the system and the data it manages. Such an approach can lead to widespread misconfigurations, security gaps, and an inability to effectively manage the endpoint environment, potentially causing significant financial and reputational damage to the organization. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a dilemma should employ a structured decision-making process. First, they must clearly identify the ethical and professional obligations, which include data integrity, client confidentiality, and responsible system implementation. Second, they should assess the potential risks and consequences associated with each course of action, considering both immediate and long-term impacts. Third, they should consult relevant organizational policies, industry best practices, and, if applicable, regulatory guidelines pertaining to data management and system deployment. Finally, they should advocate for the approach that best upholds these principles, even if it requires additional time or resources, by clearly communicating the risks of alternative, less rigorous approaches to stakeholders. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate a critical security vulnerability has been identified in a widely deployed application managed by IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1. A patch is available, but the standard change management process requires a multi-day review and approval cycle. The administrator has the authority to deploy the patch directly using TEM. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Deploy the patch immediately to all endpoints to mitigate the security risk as quickly as possible. Option B. Initiate the standard change management process, documenting the vulnerability and the proposed patch, and await approval before deployment. Option C. Inform management of the vulnerability and the need for an expedited patch, and proceed with deployment once a verbal confirmation is received from a direct supervisor. Option D. Deploy the patch to a small group of non-critical test endpoints, first to verify its functionality, before proceeding with a wider deployment. The correct answer is A. Deploy the patch immediately to all endpoints to mitigate the security risk as quickly as possible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between the immediate need to address a critical security vulnerability and the established change management procedures designed to prevent unintended consequences. The temptation to bypass formal processes for speed can lead to significant risks, including system instability, data corruption, or the introduction of new, unforeseen vulnerabilities. The administrator must balance urgency with due diligence, a common ethical tightrope in IT operations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established change management protocols, even in a high-pressure situation. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that all changes are documented, reviewed, tested where feasible within the time frame, and approved by the appropriate stakeholders. This systematic process minimizes the risk of introducing errors, maintains audit trails, and upholds the integrity of the IT environment. In the context of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager, TEM V8. 1. This would involve following the documented procedures for deploying patches or configuration changes, which typically include a review and approval phase before widespread implementation. This approach is ethically sound as it demonstrates responsibility, accountability, and a commitment to maintaining a secure and stable system for all users, adhering to the principles of professional IT conduct. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the patch immediately without any formal review or approval process represents a significant ethical and professional failure. It bypasses critical risk mitigation steps, potentially leading to widespread system disruption or security breaches if the patch is flawed or incompatible. This violates the principle of due diligence and could be seen as negligent. Deploying the patch to a limited set of non-critical systems first, without informing or seeking approval from management or the security team, is also problematic. While it attempts a form of testing, it still circumvents the formal change control process and lacks the necessary oversight. This can lead to inconsistent security postures across the environment and may still result in unforeseen issues on the tested systems without proper documentation or rollback plans. Escalating the issue to management and requesting an emergency change request, but then proceeding with the deployment before receiving formal approval, is a partial adherence but ultimately a failure. It acknowledges the need for a process, but then disregards it when faced with perceived urgency. This demonstrates a lack of respect for established procedures and can undermine the authority of the change control board or approving body, creating a precedent for future procedural bypasses. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should follow a structured decision-making process. First, assess the true urgency and potential impact of the vulnerability. Second, consult the organization's established change management policy. Third, communicate transparently with relevant stakeholders, e.g., IT management security team, about the risk and proposed solution. Fourth, if an emergency exception is warranted, follow the defined emergency change procedure, which typically involves expedited review and approval. If no emergency procedure exists, the default should be to follow the standard change control process, even if it means a slight delay, to ensure thorough risk assessment and mitigation. Question 6. Market research demonstrates that employees are increasingly concerned about their digital privacy within the workplace. As an IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8, one administrator tasked with deploying a new security monitoring solution, you discover that the TEM agent can collect a wide range of endpoint data, including browsing history, application usage, and keystroke logs. Your direct manager suggests enabling the collection of all available endpoint data to ensure maximum visibility and proactive threat detection, stating that, if it's there, we should be collecting it to be safe. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Collect endpoint data selectively based on informal requests from individual managers, focusing on data that seems suspicious or relevant to their immediate concerns, without a formal policy or broad employee notification. Option B. Defer the deployment of the TEM agent until a comprehensive data privacy impact assessment can be conducted, even if this delays the security project significantly. Option C. Implement data collection only for the specific types of endpoint data that are directly relevant to the defined security monitoring objectives and are permitted by company policy and applicable U.S. privacy laws, ensuring transparency with employees about what data is collected and why. Option D. Enable the collection of all available endpoint data as suggested by your manager, prioritizing comprehensive visibility for security purposes and assuming that employee consent is implied by their use of company equipment. Correct answer is C. Implement data collection only for the specific types of endpoint data that are directly relevant to the defined security monitoring objectives and are permitted by company policy and applicable U.S. privacy laws, ensuring transparency with employees about what data is collected and why. Explanation. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma common in IT implementation projects, specifically concerning data privacy and compliance within the context of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager, TEM, V8. 1. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive system monitoring and security with the legal and ethical obligations to protect sensitive employee data. The regulatory framework for this exam, C2090-560 IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1 implementation implies a focus on U.S. regulations, as IBM is a U.S.-based company and TEM is a widely used enterprise solution in the U.S. Therefore, the analysis will be grounded in U.S. privacy laws and ethical IT practices. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established data privacy policies and legal requirements, ensuring that any data collection is necessary, proportionate, and transparent. This aligns with principles found in regulations like the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, if healthcare data is involved, or general data protection principles applicable to employee data under various state and federal laws. It emphasizes obtaining explicit consent or ensuring a clear legal basis for data processing, and limiting data collection to what is strictly required for the stated purpose. This approach upholds employee trust and avoids potential legal repercussions and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that involves collecting all available endpoint data without explicit justification or consent is ethically and legally problematic. This could violate employee privacy rights and potentially contravene laws governing data collection and usage. Such an approach risks unauthorized access to sensitive personal information, leading to significant legal penalties, fines, and a severe breach of trust between the employer and employees. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively collecting data based on a manager's informal request without a formal policy or documented justification, is also unacceptable. This creates an ad hoc and potentially biased data collection process. Lacking the necessary oversight and accountability, it opens the door to misuse of data and can lead to discriminatory practices, undermining the principles of fairness and due process. A professional decision-making process in such situations involves 1. Identifying the core ethical and legal considerations. What data is being collected? For what purpose? Who has access? What are the potential privacy implications? 2. Consulting relevant policies and regulations. reviewing internal data privacy policies and applicable U.S. federal and state laws. 3. Seeking clarification and approval, engaging with legal counsel, HR, and relevant stakeholders to ensure compliance and obtain necessary authorizations. 4. Documenting the decision and rationale, maintaining a clear record of the justification for data collection and the steps taken to ensure privacy. 5. Implementing data minimization and security measures, collecting only necessary data and ensuring robust security controls are in place. Question 7. Consider a scenario where a client implementing IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1 requests a custom script to automate a specific endpoint configuration task that is not directly supported by a pre-built TEM V8. 1 action. The client insists on this custom script, citing an urgent business need, but the consultant has concerns about the script's security implications and its potential to bypass established TEM V8. 1 security policies. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Conduct a thorough security assessment of the proposed custom script, evaluate its necessity against the client's stated business need, and if deemed acceptable and secure, implement it with comprehensive documentation and integration into the TEM V8. 1. Environment. Option B. Immediately implement the custom script as requested by the client to meet their urgent business need, prioritizing client satisfaction over potential security risks. Option C. Refuse to implement any custom scripting and strictly adhere to the out-of-the-box TEM V8. 1 functionalities, informing the client that their request cannot be accommodated. Option D. Implement the custom script without performing a security assessment or providing detailed documentation, assuming the client's request implies it is safe and effective. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough security assessment of the proposed custom script, evaluate its necessity against the client's stated business need, and if deemed acceptable and secure, implement it with comprehensive documentation and integration into the TEM V8. 1. Environment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate desire for a specific technical solution and the consultant's ethical obligation to recommend the most secure and compliant approach, even if it deviates from the client's initial request. The consultant must balance client satisfaction with the responsibility to uphold industry best practices and regulatory adherence, particularly concerning data security and endpoint management, as governed by the C2090-560 IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1. Implementation framework. Correct approach, which involves thoroughly assessing the client's actual needs and recommending a solution that aligns with IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1. Capabilities and relevant security best practices represents best professional practice. This is because it prioritizes a secure, efficient, and compliant implementation. By focusing on understanding the underlying business problem and leveraging the full capabilities of TEM V8. 1. The consultant ensures the solution is not only functional, but also robust against potential security vulnerabilities, and meets any implicit or explicit regulatory requirements related to endpoint management and data protection within the scope of the exam's jurisdiction. This proactive and needs-driven approach builds trust and delivers long-term value. An incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing the client's requested, potentially insecure, custom script without proper vetting fails to meet professional standards. This is because it bypasses critical security reviews and potentially introduces vulnerabilities that could lead to data breaches or noncompliance with data handling regulations. Such an action prioritizes expediency over security and ethical responsibility. Another incorrect approach, which is to refuse to implement any custom scripting and rigidly stick to out-of-the-box TEM features without considering the client's specific, potentially valid, operational needs, is also professionally deficient. While it might appear to be a safe route, it demonstrates a lack of flexibility and a failure to fully understand and address the client's business requirements. This can lead to an inefficient or incomplete solution, frustrating the client and potentially leading them to seek less scrupulous alternatives. A further incorrect approach, which is to implement the custom script but fail to document its functionality, security implications, or integration with TEM V8. 1. Is ethically problematic. This lack of transparency and documentation creates a significant risk for future maintenance, troubleshooting, and security audits. It undermines the principle of accountability and can lead to unforeseen issues down the line, potentially impacting compliance and operational stability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive discovery phase to understand the client's true business objectives and technical constraints. This should be followed by an evaluation of how IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager v8 one can best address these needs, considering both standard functionalities and the feasibility and security implications of custom solutions. Ethical considerations, including data security, compliance, and transparency, must be paramount throughout the process. If custom scripting is deemed necessary, it must undergo rigorous security review, thorough testing, and complete documentation before deployment. Question 8. The investigation demonstrates that while implementing IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager v8, 1. A consultant discovered that certain critical functionalities, as understood by the client, are not fully supported by the current version or require significant workarounds that were not initially discussed. The client is eager to proceed with the deployment, emphasizing the tight deadline and the need to showcase immediate progress. The consultant is aware that proceeding without full disclosure of these limitations could lead to significant operational issues and user dissatisfaction post-implementation. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action for the consultant? Option A. Inform the client that their understanding of the software's capabilities is incorrect and that the project cannot proceed without a complete rescoping based on the software's actual functionality. Without offering immediate solutions, Option B. Immediately inform the client of the discovered limitations, clearly explaining the implications for the project's success and offering alternative strategies or phased implementation plans to address these issues. Option C. Proceed with the implementation as planned, assuming the client will adapt to the limitations or that they can be resolved in a future patch, and address any issues that arise after deployment. Option D. Downplay the significance of the discovered limitations to the client, focusing only on the aspects of the implementation that are proceeding smoothly to maintain client confidence and avoid delaying the project. The correct answer is B. Immediately inform the client of the discovered limitations, clearly explaining the implications for the project's success and offering alternative strategies or phased implementation plans to address these issues. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's desire for a specific outcome and the consultant's ethical obligation to provide accurate and unbiased advice. The consultant has discovered information that contradicts the client's assumptions, and disclosing this information could jeopardize the project's immediate approval or the client's perceived success. The pressure to maintain a good client relationship and secure future business can create a temptation to downplay or omit critical findings. Careful judgment is required to balance client satisfaction with professional integrity and adherence to regulatory guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves transparently communicating the findings, even if they are unfavorable. This aligns with the ethical principles of honesty, integrity, and professional competence expected of IT consultants. By presenting the full picture, including the potential risks and limitations identified by IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager v8. 1. The consultant upholds their duty to provide accurate information, enabling the client to make informed decisions. This approach fosters trust and long-term professional relationships, as it demonstrates a commitment to the client's best interests, not just immediate project goals. Adherence to the implied regulatory framework for IT consulting, which emphasizes truthful representation of system capabilities and limitations, is paramount. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves selectively presenting data that supports the client's desired outcome while omitting or downplaying contradictory findings. This constitutes a failure of professional integrity and honesty. It misleads the client, potentially leading to poor decision-making, project failure, and significant financial or operational repercussions. Ethically, this is a breach of trust and professional duty. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the implementation without fully disclosing the identified issues, hoping they can be resolved later or will not significantly impact the client. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and professional responsibility. It risks significant system instability, security vulnerabilities, or performance degradation, all of which are critical concerns when implementing enterprise management solutions like IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager. This approach also violates the implicit expectation of providing a robust and reliable solution. A third incorrect approach is to blame the client's assumptions or requirements for the discrepancies without offering constructive solutions or alternative strategies. While the client's assumptions might be flawed, a professional consultant's role is to identify these issues and guide the client towards a more effective path, not simply to point out problems. This approach lacks professionalism and collaborative problem-solving, failing to meet the client's needs for expert guidance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and professional responsibility. This involves 1. Identifying the core ethical principles at play: honesty, integrity, competence, client's best interest. 2. Gathering all relevant facts and understanding the implications of the findings. 3. Evaluating potential courses of action against these principles and professional standards. 4. Communicating findings clearly and constructively, offering solutions or mitigation strategies. 5. Documenting all communications and decisions. In this case, the consultant must prioritize truthful disclosure and collaborative problem-solving over short-term client appeasement. Question 9. Upon reviewing the patch deployment logs for IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8, 1. A significant backlog of critical security updates has accumulated. To address this, which of the following approaches best optimizes the patching process while minimizing operational risk? Option A. Rely solely on manual review and approval for each individual patch deployment across all endpoints to ensure absolute control. Option B. Implement a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot group of non-critical endpoints, followed by gradual expansion to broader segments of the network based on successful pilot outcomes and defined rollback procedures. Option C. Prioritize patching only those endpoints that have reported specific vulnerabilities, bypassing broader patch application for others. Option D. Immediately deploy all critical security patches to all endpoints simultaneously to ensure maximum security coverage in the shortest possible timeframe. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot group of non-critical endpoints, followed by gradual expansion to broader segments of the network based on successful pilot outcomes and defined rollback procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for efficient patch deployment with the potential for disruption to critical business functions. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing a process optimization strategy for IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager (TEM) V8, one that minimizes risk while maximizing effectiveness. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that aligns with organizational policies, operational constraints, and the specific capabilities of TEM. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, risk-mitigated deployment strategy by first testing patches in a controlled environment and then gradually expanding the rollout. It allows for early detection of compatibility issues or performance degradation without impacting the entire production environment. This aligns with general IT best practices for change management and risk reduction, which are implicitly supported by the need for reliable and secure endpoint management, as mandated by various IT governance frameworks. While the exam syllabus for C2090-560 does not specify a particular jurisdiction's regulations, the principles of due diligence, risk management, and operational continuity are universally recognized in professional IT practice. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, widespread deployment of all patches without prior testing is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses essential quality assurance steps, significantly increasing the risk of widespread system outages, data corruption, or security vulnerabilities arising from untested patches. Such an approach demonstrates a failure in risk assessment and a disregard for operational stability, potentially leading to significant business disruption and financial losses. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the speed of patch deployment without considering the impact on end users or critical applications, is also professionally unsound. While rapid patching is desirable for security, it must be balanced with the need for system availability and user productivity. Ignoring these factors can lead to a backlash from users, decreased operational efficiency, and a loss of confidence in the IT department. A third incorrect approach, relying on manual intervention for every patch deployment decision, negates the automation benefits of TEM and leads to significant inefficiencies. This approach is not scalable, is prone to human error and delays the application of critical security updates, thereby increasing the organization's vulnerability. It fails to leverage the capabilities of the TEM platform for process optimization. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the TEM V8. 1. Capabilities: a comprehensive risk assessment of each patch, a clear definition of testing environments, and a phased rollout plan with defined rollback procedures. Professionals should consult with application owners and business stakeholders to understand critical dependencies and potential impacts. The decision-making framework should prioritize minimizing disruption, ensuring security, and maintaining operational continuity, all while effectively utilizing the tools at their disposal. Question 10. The performance metrics show that several TEM V8.1 relays are operating at higher than optimal CPU utilization during peak hours, suggesting potential for process optimization. However, these relays are critical for patch deployment and inventory collection, which are subject to strict audit requirements. What is the most prudent approach to address this performance concern while ensuring continued regulatory compliance? Option A. Immediately deploy configuration changes to all identified high-utilization relays to achieve maximum performance gains across the entire TEM V8.1 infrastructure. Option B. Manually adjust the CPU affinity settings on the affected relays to prioritize TEM V8.1 processes without consulting the change management process or performing impact analysis. Option C. Implement a phased optimization strategy, starting with a small subset of non-critical relays, and closely monitor performance and audit log integrity before expanding the changes to the broader environment. Option D. Disable certain inventory collection tasks on the high-utilization relays to reduce their immediate workload, assuming that compliance can be addressed retrospectively. The correct answer is C. Implement a phased optimization strategy, starting with a small subset of non-critical relays, and closely monitor performance and audit log integrity before expanding the changes to the broader environment. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for efficient resource utilization with the imperative to maintain system stability and compliance. The performance metrics, while indicating potential for optimization, also highlight a risk of unintended consequences if changes are implemented without a thorough understanding of their impact on Tivoli Endpoint Manager (TEM) V8.1's core functionalities and regulatory adherence. The correct approach, which involves a phased rollout with continuous monitoring and rollback capabilities, represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the inherent risks associated with process optimization in a regulated environment. This methodology ensures that any performance gains are realized without compromising data integrity, security, or the ability to meet audit requirements mandated by relevant U.S. regulations, e.g., SOX, HIPAA, depending on the industry context TEM is deployed in. By validating changes in a controlled manner, it allows for early detection of deviations from expected performance or compliance, thereby minimizing potential disruption and ensuring that the TEM V8.1 environment remains in a state of continuous compliance. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and change management best practices, which are implicitly or explicitly required by many U.S. regulatory frameworks governing IT systems. An incorrect approach that bypasses formal change control and testing procedures would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such an approach risks introducing instability, security vulnerabilities, or data corruption that could lead to non-compliance with data protection and financial reporting regulations. For instance, altering TEM configurations without proper validation could inadvertently expose sensitive data or disrupt the collection of audit trails, directly violating requirements for data integrity and security mandated by regulations like HIPAA or SOX. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing broad, untested optimizations across all endpoints simultaneously, ignores the principle of controlled deployment and risk mitigation. This could lead to widespread system failures, impacting business operations and potentially violating service-level agreements, SLAs, and regulatory uptime requirements. It also fails to account for the diverse configurations and patch levels that might exist within an endpoint environment, increasing the likelihood of unforeseen conflicts. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk assessment, phased implementation, and robust monitoring. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the TEM V8. 1. Deployment. Identifying critical TEM functions that must remain operational and compliant, and designing optimization strategies that can be tested and validated incrementally. A key element is establishing clear rollback procedures to quickly revert to a stable state if issues arise. This systematic approach ensures that optimization efforts are aligned with both business objectives and regulatory obligations, fostering a culture of responsible IT management. Question 11. Examination of the data shows that a recent automated deployment of a critical security patch via IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8 has resulted in intermittent application failures for a small but significant group of users in the finance department. The patch was deployed to all endpoints simultaneously. To address this, what is the most appropriate next step to optimize the process and mitigate further impact? Option A. Create a temporary exception for the affected finance department endpoints, allowing them to remain unpatched, while a separate, targeted remediation plan is developed and tested for this specific group. Option B. Manually uninstall the patch from the affected finance department endpoints and then redeploy the patch to the entire network, hoping for a different outcome. Option C. Immediately roll back the patch to all endpoints and initiate a full investigation into the patch's compatibility with the finance department's specific software configurations before any further deployment attempts. Option D. Proceed with deploying the patch to the remaining endpoints as scheduled, assuming the issue is isolated to the finance department and will not affect other business units. The correct answer is C. Immediately roll back the patch to all endpoints and initiate a full investigation into the patch's compatibility with the finance department's specific software configurations before any further deployment attempts. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for efficient endpoint management with the potential for disruption caused by aggressive patching or configuration changes. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the impact of automated processes on business-critical operations and ensuring compliance with established service-level agreements, SLAs, and operational policies. The correct approach prioritizes a phased, controlled rollout of changes, incorporating testing and validation at each stage. This aligns with best practices for process optimization in IT environments, aiming to minimize risk and maximize the likelihood of successful implementation. By leveraging the capabilities of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager, TEM, V8, one for targeted deployment and monitoring, an administrator can ensure that changes are applied only to designated groups and that their impact is assessed before wider distribution. This methodical approach is crucial for maintaining business continuity and adhering to internal change management protocols, which are often implicitly or explicitly governed by regulatory frameworks requiring due diligence in system modifications. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately consider the potential negative consequences of their actions. Deploying a blanket policy without prior testing or segmentation risks widespread disruption, potentially violating SLAs and leading to operational downtime. This could have significant financial and reputational repercussions, and in regulated industries, could even lead to non-compliance with data integrity or availability requirements. Similarly, relying solely on manual intervention after an automated deployment has gone awry is inefficient and reactive, failing to optimize the process and increasing the likelihood of further errors. Ignoring user feedback or performance metrics post-deployment demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adapt the process based on real-world impact, which is a fundamental aspect of effective process optimization and risk management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes risk assessment, phased implementation, and continuous monitoring. This involves understanding the business impact of any proposed change, identifying critical systems and user groups, and planning for rollback procedures. Leveraging the granular control offered by TEM V8, one is key to segmenting deployments and testing in controlled environments before broad application. Regular review of performance metrics and user feedback post-implementation is essential for iterative improvement and ensuring that the optimized process continues to meet business objectives without introducing unacceptable risks. Question 12. Performance analysis shows that several critical user workstations are experiencing intermittent slowdowns and unresponsiveness, coinciding with periods of high CPU utilization attributed to the IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1 client. What is the most appropriate initial course of action to address this performance degradation while ensuring continued endpoint management effectiveness? Option A. Immediately disable the TEM V8. 1 client on all affected workstations to eliminate its resource impact and allow users to resume normal operations. Option B. Analyze the resource consumption patterns of the TEM V8. 1 client on affected endpoints, review TEM server logs for related errors or warnings, and investigate specific TEM tasks or policies that are running during the observed slowdowns to identify potential configuration or relevant statement inefficiencies. Option C. Arbitrarily reduce the frequency of all TEM V8. 1 scans and task executions across the entire environment without specific analysis of the affected endpoints or the nature of the slowdowns. Option D. Recommend a mandatory upgrade of all affected workstations to higher specification hardware, assuming the TEM V8. 1 client is inherently too resource-intensive for the current endpoint configurations. Correct answer is B. Analyze the resource consumption patterns of the TEM V8. 1 client on affected endpoints, review TEM server logs for related errors or warnings, and investigate specific TEM tasks or policies that are running during the observed slowdown to identify potential configuration or relevant statement inefficiencies. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management, balancing the need for efficient endpoint management with the potential for performance degradation. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the impact of Tivoli Endpoint Manager, TEM, V8. One's processes on the performance of managed endpoints, particularly in a production environment where disruptions can have significant business consequences. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of performance issues and implement solutions that are both effective and compliant with operational best practices. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven investigation into the TEM V8. 1 processes. This includes analyzing TEM agent resource utilization, CPU, memory, disk I/O, reviewing TEM server logs for errors or performance bottlenecks, and correlating TEM activity with observed endpoint performance degradation. The goal is to pinpoint specific TEM components or configurations that are contributing to the problem. Implementing targeted optimizations, such as adjusting scan frequencies, refining relevant statements, or optimizing task execution, represents best professional practice. This approach is aligned with the principles of ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library, for service operation and problem management, emphasizing proactive identification and resolution of issues to maintain service availability and performance. It also adheres to the implicit regulatory expectation of maintaining system integrity and operational efficiency, ensuring that deployed management tools do not negatively impact business operations. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disable or significantly reduce the functionality of TEM V8. 1. Without a thorough understanding of the cause. This could lead to security vulnerabilities if critical patches or compliance checks are no longer performed, violating the principle of maintaining a secure and compliant environment. Another incorrect approach would be to solely focus on endpoint hardware upgrades as a solution without investigating the TEM V8. 1 configuration. This is financially inefficient and fails to address the root cause, potentially masking the underlying problem and leading to recurring performance issues. A third incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily adjust TEM V8, 1 settings without proper testing or documentation. This can lead to unintended consequences, further performance degradation, or the introduction of new issues, demonstrating a lack of due diligence and professional accountability. Professionals should employ a structured problem-solving framework. This involves 1. Defining the problem clearly, including the observed symptoms and their impact. 2. Gathering data through monitoring tools, logs, and endpoint analysis. 3. Analyzing the data to identify potential causes, prioritizing those related to TEM V8. 1. 4. Developing and testing hypotheses for solutions. 5. Implementing the chosen solution in a controlled manner, with rollback plans. 6. Verifying the effectiveness of the solution and documenting the process. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, risks are mitigated, and the most effective and compliant resolution is achieved. Question 13. Consider a scenario where a critical security vulnerability has been identified across a large enterprise network managed by IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1. The IT security team wants to deploy the necessary patch immediately to mitigate the risk. However, the IT operations team is concerned about potential disruptions to critical business applications if the patch is deployed universally without prior testing. Which of the following strategies best balances the immediate need for security remediation with the operational stability of the environment? Option A. Rely on individual system administrators to manually apply the patch to their respective systems as they deem appropriate. Option B. Delay the patch deployment until a period of low business activity, such as a weekend or holiday, to minimize the impact of any potential disruptions. Option C. Deploy the patch to all endpoints simultaneously across the entire network to ensure immediate coverage and minimize the window of vulnerability. Option D. Implement a phased rollout of the patch, starting with a small pilot group of non-critical systems, followed by a broader deployment to production systems after successful validation, utilizing TEM's capabilities for targeted deployment and reporting. The correct answer is D. Implement a phased rollout of the patch, starting with a small pilot group of non-critical systems, followed by a broader deployment to production systems after successful validation, utilizing TEM's capabilities for targeted deployment and reporting. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint management, balancing the need for comprehensive security patching with the operational impact on end users and business-critical applications. The professional challenge lies in implementing a robust patching strategy that adheres to IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager (TEM) V8 1 capabilities while also considering the practicalities of a live production environment. Careful judgment is required to avoid disrupting critical business functions, while ensuring the organization remains compliant with security, best practices, and potential regulatory mandates for timely vulnerability remediation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it leverages TEM's capabilities for targeted deployment and phased rollout, minimizing risk. By first testing patches in a controlled environment and then deploying them to a pilot group before a full rollout, it allows for the identification and resolution of any compatibility issues or unexpected side effects. This proactive risk management aligns with the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that security updates are applied effectively without causing undue disruption. This methodology is implicitly supported by general IT governance principles and the operational best practices expected in enterprise environments, which TEM is designed to facilitate. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate, universal deployment without testing risks significant operational downtime and data loss if a patch introduces critical bugs or conflicts with existing applications. This would be a direct violation of operational integrity and could lead to financial losses and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying patching indefinitely due to fear of disruption, creates a substantial security vulnerability. This failure to remediate known vulnerabilities exposes the organization to potential data breaches and non-compliance with any applicable security standards or regulations that mandate timely patching. A third incorrect approach, relying solely on manual patching, is inefficient, error-prone, and fails to leverage the automation and centralized management capabilities of TEM, leading to inconsistent coverage and increased risk. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the organization's risk tolerance, critical business processes, and the specific vulnerabilities being addressed. A structured decision-making process involves assessing the severity of the vulnerability, identifying affected systems, evaluating potential patch impact, defining a phased deployment strategy, including testing and pilot groups, establishing clear rollback procedures, and communicating effectively with stakeholders. This systematic approach ensures that security objectives are met while operational stability is maintained. Question 14. Analysis of a proposed process optimization within an IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. One implementation reveals a potential for significant time savings in patch deployment reporting. The current reporting mechanism requires manual aggregation of data from multiple TEM consoles, which is time-consuming and prone to human error. The proposed optimization involves developing a custom script to automate this aggregation and generate a consolidated report directly from the TEM database. What is the most appropriate approach to implementing this optimization while adhering to best practices for TEM V8? 1. Option A. Immediately deploy the custom script to all TEM consoles to realize the time savings as quickly as possible, as the benefits are clear and the script is straightforward. Option B. Implement the custom script on a single TEM console first to observe its behavior for a week before considering wider deployment, without formal testing or documentation. Option C. Rely on the vendor's standard reporting tools exclusively, as any customization introduces unnecessary risk and complexity to the TEM V8. 1. Environment. Option D. Develop and thoroughly test the custom script in a controlled lab environment that mirrors the production TEM V8. 1. Setup. Validate its accuracy and performance, and then plan a phased rollout with rollback procedures. The correct answer is A. Immediately deploy the custom script to all TEM consoles to realize the time savings as quickly as possible, as the benefits are clear and the script is straightforward. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT service management, balancing the need for efficient process optimization with the imperative to maintain compliance and security. The core difficulty lies in identifying and implementing improvements that enhance operational effectiveness without introducing new vulnerabilities or violating established IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager (TEM) V8. 1. Implementation guidelines and any applicable regulatory frameworks that might govern endpoint management in a specific jurisdiction, though for this exam, we focus solely on the TEM V8. 1. Context as the primary regulatory framework. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, data-driven methodology that aligns with best practices for TEM V8. 1. It involves thorough analysis, validation, and controlled deployment, ensuring that any process changes are understood, tested, and documented. This minimizes risk and maximizes the likelihood of successful implementation. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes stability, security, and auditability, which are critical for any TEM V8. 1. Deployment. Adhering to the TEM V8. 1. Implementation framework, which implicitly includes principles of change management and risk mitigation, is paramount. Incorrect approaches fail by either bypassing essential validation steps, introducing unmanaged risks, or neglecting the importance of documentation and stakeholder communication. For instance, a hasty implementation without proper testing could lead to widespread disruption, unintended policy enforcement, or security gaps, all of which would be considered professional and potentially regulatory failures within the context of a controlled TEM V8. 1. Environment. Implementing changes without considering their impact on existing security baselines or compliance mandates is a direct violation of responsible IT management principles. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the TEM V8. 1. Architecture and its intended operational parameters. It requires a systematic approach to change management, including defining the problem or opportunity for optimization, gathering relevant data from TEM V8. 1. Proposing specific solutions, rigorously testing these solutions in a non-production environment, planning and executing the deployment with rollback capabilities, and finally, verifying the success of the change and updating documentation. This iterative and controlled process ensures that optimization efforts are both effective and safe. Question 15. Strategic planning requires a clear understanding of how to best leverage IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. 1. To meet organizational objectives. Considering the diverse needs of various business units and the potential impact on IT resources, which of the following approaches would be most effective for a successful implementation? Option A. Focus exclusively on cost-saving measures by deploying only the most basic TEM functionalities, deferring any advanced features until budget allows. Option B. Deploy TEM with minimal stakeholder consultation, gathering feedback only after the initial implementation is complete to avoid delaying the project timeline. Option C. Implement all available TEM features simultaneously across the entire organization to ensure comprehensive coverage from day one. Option D. Prioritize the deployment of TEM features based on a phased approach, starting with a pilot program focused on critical business needs and gradually expanding the rollout based on validated success and feedback. Correct answer is C. Implement all available TEM features simultaneously across the entire organization to ensure comprehensive coverage from day one. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT implementation projects where the technical capabilities of a solution like IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager, TEM, V8, one must be aligned with diverse business needs and existing infrastructure. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for comprehensive endpoint management with the practical constraints of budget, technical expertise, and the potential impact on end-user productivity. Stakeholders, from IT operations to business unit managers, will have varying priorities and levels of understanding regarding TEM's functionalities and limitations. Effective strategic planning requires navigating these differing perspectives to arrive at a solution that is both technically sound and strategically beneficial for the organization. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased implementation driven by a thorough understanding of business requirements and a pilot program. This aligns with best practices for large-scale IT deployments. By prioritizing critical business needs and testing the solution in a controlled environment, the organization can validate its effectiveness, identify potential issues, and refine the deployment strategy before a full rollout. This approach minimizes risk, ensures user adoption, and demonstrates tangible value, thereby justifying the investment. From a regulatory and compliance perspective, a phased approach allows for better control and auditing of the implementation process, ensuring that security and data integrity are maintained throughout. This methodical approach is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and adherence to any relevant IT governance frameworks. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on deploying all available TEM features immediately without a clear understanding of business priorities or a pilot phase. This is professionally challenging because it risks overwhelming IT resources, causing disruption to end users, and potentially implementing features that are not essential or even detrimental to current business operations. From a regulatory standpoint, a rushed, unfocused deployment can lead to misconfigurations that compromise security, violate data privacy regulations, or fail to meet compliance mandates due to a lack of proper testing and validation. Another incorrect approach prioritizes cost reduction above all else, leading to a minimal deployment of TEM that fails to address core endpoint management needs. This is professionally unsound, as it undermines the strategic purpose of implementing TEM, which is to improve efficiency, security, and compliance. Ethically, it represents a failure to deliver on the promised benefits of the technology to the organization. Regulatory failures could include neglecting essential security patching or configuration management capabilities, leaving the organization vulnerable to cyber threats and non-compliance with industry-specific regulations. A third incorrect approach involves deferring all stakeholder input until after the initial deployment. This is a significant professional and ethical failing. It demonstrates a lack of collaboration and ignores the critical role of end users and business unit leaders in defining successful IT solutions. This can lead to a solution that is technically functional but operationally irrelevant or even obstructive, resulting in low adoption rates and wasted resources. Regulatory and compliance risks arise from the potential for the deployed solution to inadvertently create new vulnerabilities or hinder existing compliance efforts due to a lack of understanding of how different business units operate. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, iterative approach to strategic planning for IT implementations. This involves 1. Deeply understanding business objectives and stakeholder needs through active engagement and requirements gathering. 2. Conducting a thorough assessment of existing infrastructure and technical capabilities. 3. Developing a phased implementation plan that prioritizes high-impact functionalities and includes a pilot program for validation. 4. Establishing clear metrics for success and continuously monitoring performance and user feedback. 5. Ensuring that all implementation activities align with relevant regulatory and compliance frameworks, with a focus on security, data integrity, and auditability. This systematic process mitigates risks, maximizes the value of the investment, and fosters stakeholder buy-in. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal that the initial deployment of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8 One has not fully addressed the diverse operational and compliance needs across different business units. Which of the following approaches best represents a professional and effective strategy for addressing this situation and ensuring future successful implementations? Option A. Immediately initiate a broad retraining program for all IT staff on TEMV8. One functionalities, assuming the core issue is a lack of technical expertise in its application. Option B. Focus solely on enhancing the security patching capabilities of TEMV8. 1. As this is typically the most critical function for compliance and risk mitigation. Option C. Conduct a series of targeted workshops with representatives from each key business unit and the compliance department to gather detailed requirements, identify specific use cases, and collaboratively define configuration priorities for TEMV8. 1. Option D. Proceed with a phased rollout of additional TEMV8. 1 features based on a predefined technical roadmap with minimal further stakeholder consultation. The correct answer is C. Conduct a series of targeted workshops with representatives from each key business unit and the compliance department to gather detailed requirements, identify specific use cases, and collaboratively define configuration priorities for TEMV8. 1. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the implementation of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager, TEM, V8. 1 involves managing a diverse set of endpoints across an organization. Stakeholders, such as IT security, compliance officers, and business unit managers, will have varying priorities and perspectives on how TEM should be configured and utilized. Balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational requirements and potential impact on end-user productivity requires careful consideration and communication. The challenge lies in translating technical capabilities into business value and ensuring that the implementation aligns with the organization's overall strategic objectives and risk appetite, all within the defined regulatory framework for the exam jurisdiction. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on proactive engagement with key stakeholders to understand their specific needs, concerns, and regulatory obligations related to endpoint management. This involves conducting thorough requirements gathering sessions, workshops, and interviews to document use cases, desired outcomes, and any existing compliance mandates. By involving stakeholders early and continuously, the implementation team can ensure that the TEMV8 one solution is configured to meet these diverse requirements, thereby maximizing its effectiveness and minimizing potential conflicts or oversights. This aligns with best professional practice by fostering collaboration, ensuring buy-in, and building a solution that is both technically sound and strategically aligned with organizational goals and regulatory adherence. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that solely focuses on technical deployment without understanding stakeholder needs risks creating a solution that is either underutilized, misconfigured, or fails to meet critical compliance requirements. This could lead to security vulnerabilities, audit failures, and dissatisfaction among business units, representing a failure to adhere to professional due diligence and potentially violating regulatory mandates that require demonstrable control over endpoints. An approach that prioritizes one stakeholder group's needs, e.g., IT security, to the exclusion of others, e.g., end-user productivity or specific business unit operational needs, can lead to an imbalanced implementation. This can result in resistance from other groups, workarounds that bypass security controls, or a system that hinders legitimate business operations, all of which are professionally unsound and may indirectly lead to non-compliance with broader organizational policies or regulations. An approach that delays stakeholder engagement until after the initial deployment is a significant professional failure. It assumes a one-size-fits-all solution and ignores the nuanced requirements of different parts of the organization. This reactive approach can lead to costly rework, missed opportunities for optimization, and a failure to meet the diverse compliance and operational needs that are essential for a successful TEMV8. 1. Implementation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a stakeholder-centric approach. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding their perspectives and requirements through active listening and structured engagement, and prioritizing these needs based on organizational strategy and regulatory imperatives. The decision-making process should involve iterative feedback loops, clear communication of technical capabilities and limitations, and a commitment to delivering a solution that provides tangible business value while ensuring compliance and security. Question 17. Research into the implementation of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8. One has highlighted concerns regarding the collection of endpoint data. A project manager is tasked with deploying TEM agents across the organization. Considering the need for comprehensive endpoint visibility for security patching and software inventory, what is the most professionally responsible approach to ensure compliance with data privacy principles and organizational security policies? Option A. Proceed with a phased deployment, obtaining explicit stakeholder approval for the scope of data collection and ensuring all data is encrypted during transit and at rest, adhering to the principle of data minimization. Option B. Collect all available endpoint data without prior specific stakeholder approval, assuming that broad visibility is implicitly permitted for security purposes. Option C. Postpone the TEM V8 deployment indefinitely until a perfect, risk-free solution for data collection that satisfies all hypothetical future compliance requirements can be identified. Option D. Deploy TEM agents with default configurations across all endpoints immediately to gain maximum visibility, addressing any potential data privacy concerns retrospectively. The correct answer is A. Proceed with a phased deployment, obtaining explicit stakeholder approval for the scope of data collection and ensuring all data is encrypted during transit and at rest, adhering to the principle of data minimization. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for system visibility and the potential for unauthorized access or data exposure. The implementation of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager (TEM) V8 involves deploying agents to endpoints, which necessitates careful planning to ensure compliance with data privacy regulations and organizational security policies. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire for comprehensive endpoint data collection with the ethical and legal obligations to protect sensitive information. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, risk-assessed deployment. This involves obtaining explicit stakeholder approval for the scope of data collection, ensuring that only necessary information is gathered, and implementing robust security measures for data transmission and storage. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to many data protection frameworks. By engaging with stakeholders and adhering to established security protocols, the implementation team demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible data handling, thereby mitigating legal and reputational risks. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with a broad, unapproved data collection without explicit consent or a clear understanding of the data's sensitivity is professionally unacceptable. This failure directly contravenes data privacy regulations by potentially collecting more information than is necessary or authorized, leading to a breach of confidentiality and trust. It also violates ethical guidelines by disregarding the privacy rights of individuals whose data might be collected. Another incorrect approach, such as deploying agents with default, overly permissive configurations, poses significant security risks. This can lead to unauthorized access to sensitive data, a violation of security policies, and potential noncompliance with data protection laws that mandate appropriate technical and organizational measures to safeguard data. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to implement the principle of least privilege. A further incorrect approach, which is to delay deployment indefinitely due to fear of noncompliance without actively seeking solutions or guidance, is also professionally deficient. While caution is warranted, an indefinite delay without a proactive strategy to address compliance concerns hinders the organization's ability to leverage the benefits of TEM for security and management. This inaction can lead to missed opportunities for improving endpoint security and can be seen as a failure to manage project risks effectively. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This includes identifying potential data privacy and security risks associated with the TEM V8 implementation, understanding the specific data that will be collected, and evaluating the sensitivity of that data. It requires proactive engagement with legal, compliance, and security teams to ensure all regulatory requirements are met. Furthermore, it necessitates clear communication and consensus building with all relevant stakeholders to define the scope of deployment and data collection, ensuring that the implementation aligns with both business objectives and legal obligations. Question 18. System analysis indicates that a critical business unit requires immediate deployment of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8, one to manage a new fleet of devices essential for a time-sensitive product launch. The business unit is pushing for a rapid, uncompromised rollout to meet their deadline, expressing concerns that extensive security reviews and phased implementation will delay their launch. From a stakeholder perspective, what is the most professionally responsible approach to ensure both the business unit's critical needs are met and the organization's security and regulatory compliance for TEMV8? 1 are maintained. Option A. Prioritize a comprehensive, risk-based assessment of the TEMV8. 1 deployment, including thorough security control validation and a phased rollout strategy, while actively communicating the necessity of these steps to the business unit and exploring all available options to expedite the process without compromising security. Option B. Implement TEMV8, 1 with only the most basic security configurations, deferring advanced security features and compliance checks until after the product launch to satisfy the business unit's immediate deployment needs. Option C. Delegate the responsibility for TEMV8, 1 security and compliance to the business unit, allowing them to implement the system as they see fit to meet their deadline, with minimal oversight from the IT security team. Option D. Proceed with the immediate, full deployment of TEMV8, 1 as requested by the business unit to meet their deadline, with the understanding that security and compliance checks will be performed retrospectively after the launch. The correct answer is A. Prioritize a comprehensive, risk-based assessment of the TEMV8. 1 deployment, including thorough security control validation and a phased rollout strategy, while actively communicating the necessity of these steps to the business unit and exploring all available options to expedite the process without compromising security. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT system implementation, balancing the immediate needs of a critical business unit with the broader, long-term security and compliance requirements of the organization. The challenge lies in the inherent tension between rapid deployment for a high-priority project and the meticulous adherence to established security protocols and regulatory mandates that govern the use of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager (TEM) V8. 1. The stakeholder perspective is crucial here, as different groups will have varying priorities and understandings of risk. The IT security team will focus on compliance and risk mitigation, while the business unit will prioritize functionality and speed to market. Navigating these competing interests requires a deep understanding of the TEMV8, 1 implementation framework, and its implications for the organization's security posture. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, risk-based assessment and a phased implementation strategy that aligns with the regulatory framework for TEMV8. 1. This ensures that all security controls are adequately tested and validated before full deployment, minimizing the risk of introducing vulnerabilities or non-compliance. It also demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and responsible system management, which are fundamental to maintaining an organization's security and regulatory standing. By engaging all relevant stakeholders early and often, this approach fosters transparency and collaboration, leading to a more robust and accepted solution. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately addresses the security and compliance requirements introduces significant regulatory and ethical failures. For instance, a failure to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment could lead to the deployment of TEMV8, 1 in a configuration that violates data privacy regulations or exposes sensitive information. Similarly, neglecting to involve the security team in the planning and testing phases could result in the implementation of features that are inherently insecure or do not meet industry best practices for endpoint management, thereby creating a compliance gap. Ethically, such an approach breaches the professional responsibility to protect the organization's assets and data and to act with integrity in system deployments. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured, risk-aware methodology. First, clearly identify all stakeholders and their respective interests and concerns. Second, thoroughly understand the specific requirements of the TEMV8, 1 implementation, including its security features, operational considerations, and any relevant regulatory mandates. Third, Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that evaluates potential threats, vulnerabilities, and the impact of noncompliance. Fourth, develop a phased implementation plan that incorporates robust testing, validation, and security reviews at each stage. Finally, maintain open communication channels with all stakeholders throughout the project lifecycle, ensuring that decisions are transparent and well documented. Question 19. The control framework reveals that the implementation of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager v8.1 is encountering resistance from several key business units due to concerns about operational disruption and perceived lack of alignment with their specific compliance reporting needs. Which approach best addresses these stakeholder-driven challenges to ensure a successful and compliant deployment? Option A. Proceed with the TEMV8.1 implementation based on the IT security team's initial assessment of critical vulnerabilities and compliance mandates, assuming that all business units will eventually adapt to the standardized security policies and reporting structures. Option B. Conduct a series of workshops with each business unit to understand their unique operational constraints, compliance requirements, and reporting needs, and then tailor the TEMV8.1 configuration, policy deployment, and reporting to address these specific concerns, ensuring clear communication throughout the process. Option C. Implement TEMV8.1 with a default configuration that enforces the strictest security settings across all endpoints, as this will satisfy the most stringent compliance requirements and minimize the need for ongoing customization for individual business units. Option D. Prioritize the deployment of TEMV8.1 to the business unit that has the most vocal IT leadership, as their support is crucial for driving adoption across the organization, and address other units' concerns in a later phase. The correct answer is B. Conduct a series of workshops with each business unit to understand their unique operational constraints, compliance requirements, and reporting needs, and then tailor the TEMV8.1 configuration, policy deployment, and reporting to address these specific concerns, ensuring clear communication throughout the process. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in enterprise IT environments, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational realities of deploying and managing endpoint solutions across a diverse infrastructure. In the context of IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager, TEM, V8.1, a key aspect of implementation involves understanding how different stakeholder groups perceive and interact with the system. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the implementation team to not only grasp the technical intricacies of TEM, but also to navigate the varied priorities, concerns, and levels of technical understanding among different business units and IT departments. Misinterpreting stakeholder needs can lead to suboptimal TEM configurations, resistance to adoption, and ultimately, failure to achieve the desired security and compliance posture. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of stakeholder requirements and concerns before and during the TEMV8.1 implementation. This involves proactive engagement, clear communication, and tailoring the deployment strategy to address specific needs, such as differing patch management windows for critical business systems versus less sensitive workstations, or varying reporting requirements for compliance audits. This aligns with the principles of effective project management and IT governance, ensuring that the technology serves the business objectives and adheres to relevant regulatory frameworks by building consensus and buy-in. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical capabilities of TEMV8.1 without considering stakeholder input would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a deployment that is technically sound but operationally disruptive, causing significant business impact and potentially violating internal policies or external regulations if critical systems are inadvertently affected by patching or configuration changes. Another incorrect approach, such as prioritizing the needs of only one dominant department without consulting others, would create silos and resentment, undermining the unified security and management goals TEM is designed to achieve. This also fails to meet the broad compliance requirements that typically span multiple business functions. A third incorrect approach, assuming all stakeholders have the same technical understanding and requirements, would result in a one-size-fits-all solution that is likely to be ineffective for many users and may not meet specific compliance mandates for certain data types or systems. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, Identify all relevant stakeholders and their potential impact on or by the TEMV8. 1. Implementation. Second, conduct thorough needs assessments and risk analyses for each stakeholder group. Third, develop a communication plan that ensures transparency and addresses concerns proactively. Fourth, design and configure TEMV8. 1. In a phased manner, incorporating feedback and pilot testing with representative user groups. Finally, establish clear metrics for success that align with both technical and business objectives, ensuring ongoing monitoring and adaptation. Question 20. Which approach would be most effective for implementing IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager V8? 1. Security policies across a global organization, considering the need for regulatory compliance and minimal disruption to end-user productivity. Option A. Mandate immediate, system-wide deployment of all security policies to ensure uniform protection across the entire organization, with post-deployment support for any issues that arise. Option B. Implement a pilot program in a single department to test the effectiveness of the policies and gather user feedback before a phased rollout to other departments, prioritizing communication and training throughout the process. Option C. Focus on deploying only the most critical security policies initially, deferring less urgent ones to a later phase to reduce the immediate impact on users and IT support. Option D. Prioritize user convenience by allowing exceptions to certain security policies where they might impede workflow, with the understanding that these exceptions will be reviewed periodically. Correct answer is B. Implement a pilot program in a single department to test the effectiveness of the policies and gather user feedback before a phased rollout to other departments, prioritizing communication and training throughout the process. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in IT endpoint management, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational realities and user experience of a diverse workforce. The IBM Tivoli Endpoint Manager, now IBM Big Fix, platform is designed to address these challenges, but its implementation requires careful consideration of stakeholder needs and regulatory adherence. The professional challenge lies in navigating the competing priorities of IT security, business operations, and end-user productivity, all within the framework of relevant regulations. The correct approach prioritizes a phased, risk-based deployment that minimizes disruption and maximizes user adoption. This aligns with best practices for change management and IT governance, ensuring that security policies are implemented effectively without crippling essential business functions. It also demonstrates a commitment to compliance by proactively identifying and mitigating risks before widespread deployment. This approach is professionally sound because it is methodical, considers the impact on all stakeholders, and allows for iterative refinement based on real-world feedback, thereby upholding the principles of responsible IT management and data protection. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately consider the broader impact or the regulatory landscape. An approach that mandates immediate, system-wide deployment without pilot testing or user consultation risks significant operational disruption, potentially leading to security vulnerabilities if users bypass controls or if critical business processes are interrupted. This could violate data protection regulations by inadvertently exposing sensitive information or failing to maintain system integrity. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical implementation without engaging business units overlooks critical operational requirements and user needs, leading to resistance and noncompliance, which can have regulatory implications if security controls are circumvented. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes user convenience over security and compliance would directly contravene regulatory mandates for data protection and system integrity, exposing the organization to significant legal and financial risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the regulatory requirements applicable to the organization's data and operations. This should be followed by a comprehensive stakeholder analysis to identify all affected parties and their concerns. A risk assessment should then be conducted to understand potential security and operational vulnerabilities. Based on this information, a phased implementation plan, including pilot testing and user training, should be developed, with clear communication channels established throughout the process. This iterative and collaborative approach ensures that the chosen solution is both effective from a security and compliance perspective and practical for the organization's users.